Santa Maria Courthouse, ready to begin week 2 of the defense case. Inside, defense attorney Robert Sanger got right down to business, calling former Neverland housekeeper Francin Contreras to the stand. We hoped she would discredit a key prosecution witness, that is Adrian McManus. At least that was the defense hope. You be the judge. Here's what the jurors heard according to the courtroom transcripts.
All right. Now, did you visit the house of Mr. and Mrs. McManus?
Yes.
Where did they live?
In Santa Maria.
And did you visit there while Ms. McManus was working for Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
What did you observe at her house?
In all her rooms?
Yeah, let's talk about, was there a room that had some
Yes.
Michael Jackson items? Can you tell us about that?
She had hats that belonged to Mr. Jackson, pajamas, watches, T-shirts, items that belonged to the ranch.
Okay. Now, did you ever see her take items from the ranch?
Yeah.
And how did she do that?
In laundry baskets. She used to take home Mr. Jackson's clothes. She said she was going to iron them, but there was, like, a hat underneath there, and you can't iron a hat.
Okay. Was there an occasion where you all were asked to wrap Christmas presents for needy children?
Yes.
Sit a little closer. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Everybody has to do it. It's not comfortable. Sorry. What can you tell us about that?
We were sent home because it was like lots of toys and gifts for the children, and we really couldn't do all the wrapping at the ranch because it was quite a bit, so we were asked to take some of the toys home to wrap and bring them back because they didn't belong to us. And I noticed that Adrian had kept some super soakers and other items of toys for her son.
But did Adrian McManus do anything wrong? On cross-examination, that's exactly what Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin wants to know.
It was part of her job to take items that were, in fact, Mr. Jackson's personal clothing, to iron them for Mr. Jackson and return them ironed to Mr. Jackson. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And she did that on a fairly regular basis?
Yes.
She would work at home doing ironing for Mr. Jackson.
I never seen her ironing them, so I couldn't tell you, sir.
She would take it, a laundry basket with his clothing to iron, and she would tell you that that's what she was doing?
Yes.
You have no reason to believe she wasn't bringing them back, is that right?
Right.
On one occasion, you saw a felt hat that didn't need ironing.
Yes. I don't know what she was doing. She could have took it home to mend. I have no idea, sir.
She could have mended it and brought it back the next day?
I suppose so.
Did you ever ask her about that?
Nope.
Miss Contreras, did you go to work for Mervin's after you left Neverland?
Yes, I did.
Did you get fired from Mervin's for stealing?
No.
Were you prosecuted for stealing from Mervin's?
No, it was trespassing.
Well, you were prosecuted for stealing, is that right?
No, sir, it was trespassing.
You were trespassing in the store that you were working in?
No, sir. No.
Were you not working in there at the time?
Yes, I was.
You were prosecuted for trespassing in a store that you were working in?
No, sir.
Were you ordered by the court to make restitution to Mervin's?
I'm going to object, Your Honor, as to relevance.
Sustained.
Oh, that relevance objection. Better late than never. A quick note. Adrian McManus, she was a prosecution witness. She testified during the prosecution's case that she saw Michael Jackson inappropriately touch the then child actor Macaulay Culkin. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It's been a couple of glorious days for the defense, or perhaps not. Let's talk about this defense witness in particular. She gets a ding like the prosecution witnesses got dinged because of her background, her past, particularly with respect to whatever happened at Mervin's.
You know what's interesting about this case, James, is this is Alice in Wonderland. It's backwards on both sides. When the prosecution witnesses testified for the state, they got, to use your word, dinged and looked really bad because of the defense cross. Now, every witness that the defense calls, who starts out great for the defense, goes backwards 2 steps because the prosecution gets the ding. And I got to say something about Ron Zonin. He is a superb cross-examiner.
For a prosecutor, that's an ultimate compliment.
I have to agree. I thought he did a very good job on cross-examination. He did exactly what he needed to do, brought out the points he needed to bring out, and was able to sort of prop her back up with regard to the hat. You know, you can't
try to get something
hat,
for the prosecution out of it, right?
Helped him.
I just disagree. This whole presentation and most of this case has been pouring water on the cinders around the fire. Nobody's dealing with the fire.
In the fire, you mean with respect to the actual molestation?
Yes.
That's
the
true.
real charges and the real witnesses that either side may have.
But it's still all part of the fabric of the case, as I want to say. What happens here is, since you have Rule 1108 and you can put in those prior incidents by law, that what you do is you have witnesses on the part of the prosecution talking about prior acts of alleged molestation. Now you have witnesses on the part of the defense saying, hey, none of those witnesses are credible, just like Mesereau promised. If you put in the 1108 all the 1108 evidence, we are going to have mini trial after mini trial after mini trial.
Exactly.
That, by the way, is what the judge created. Again, when you say by law, it's up to the judge. The judge makes that decision, and he has allowed stuff in this case, evidence in this case, that has created a circus amongst circuses amongst circuses.
Now, is it a circus or is it indeed information?
Is a circus.
That's what you say, Howard. And just because you say it, don't make it so.
Yes, it does.
As we move on,
So
a
says
glass
the anchor.
of wine, my show dog on it, as a glass of wine with dinner or a case of Jesus juice every night. Robert Singer questions Gayle Goforth. She's a supervising housekeeper at Neverland. She's talking about Michael Jackson's drinking habits.
Going back to the entire time that you worked at the ranch, did you have occasion to see Mr. Jackson drink alcohol?
A few occasions.
All right. And roughly, let's put it this way. When did you see him drink? What occasions would you see him drink alcohol?
At mealtime, dinner time.
Okay. Now, at some point during this period of time, or from time to time, you actually took care of Mr. Jackson's room as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And so you were one of the staff people who was allowed to go into his room to straighten it up or do whatever needed to be done. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And also to supervise people who would be doing that. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Did you ever see any bottles of alcohol or other evidence of alcohol strewn about? Can you explain what you might see?
I don't recall.
Okay, so you might see a glass or something, but you wouldn't see alcohol just lying around his room.
No.
Did you have any occasion to observe whether or not Mr. Jackson would change his clothes in front of anyone? For instance, if you were in the room cleaning, would he be changing his clothes in there?
Judge, that's irrelevant as to whether he would change his clothes in her presence.
Sustained.
All right. Were there occasions where you came in and Mr. Jackson might be in the process of changing his clothes, changing a shirt or something?
No. He was very private.
All right, as expected, on cross-examination, Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin tries to discredit this witness.
Were you, in fact, suspended from your job because you were taking things that you weren't entitled to take?
I was suspended from my job over the sale of some furniture that I thought was allowed to be done. I was just doing what I was told by another party.
All right. So you took some items from Neverland, and they then accused you of taking it without the permission of the owner. Is that right?
I didn't personally take the items.
Somebody else took them, and you sold them.
I didn't sell them. It was arrangements that were made through someone else.
And ultimately, who made the decision to discipline you for that?
I believe Mr. Jackson.
All right. And thereafter, you terminated your position voluntarily. Is that right?
That's correct.
Because you were offended as to how you were treated?
Yes, I was.
Sean Chapman-Holly, are there no witnesses either side, for either side, that are beyond reproach?
Exactly. As you said, we need a dinging flow chart. Because the defense,
a ding chart.
Yes, exactly. The defense calls a witness to impeach a past prosecution witness, and then the prosecution impeaches the defense witness called to impeach a past prosecution witness.
And that, of course, goes to your point, Howard Weitzman, which has to do with what you say the judges created, but others might say, look, the rules allow this prior bad act evidence to come in, and of course, as with any witness, you can go after their credibility, which is what's happening here.
I love it. Liars, welfare fraud, thieves, trespassers. We got them all.
So who does it hurt, Ricky? The idea that the prosecution witnesses have baggage, as we might refer to it in our pseudo-pop social science sort of critique.
And so do the defense
words.
witnesses, right?
Exactly. So my question is this.
One of two.
Does it hurt either side more?
It depends. if you're looking...
Lawyer!
If you're looking for proof beyond a reasonable doubt, if you take away all the emotion, it should help Michael Jackson. On the other hand, some jurors could just throw up their hands and say everybody in this case is dysfunctional, and he hired them.
But the prosecution has the burden of proof.
But will the gravity, the emotional weight of these charges override that basic rational decision-making process. Up next, a current Neverland employee dishes the dirt for the defense. Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Team Jackson says the accuser and his brother were no angels and way out of control, especially when they were at Neverland. Under questioning by defense attorney Robert Sanger, a Neverland security chief from 2003, her name is Violet Silva, recalls how the two kids put the pedal to the metal. Here's what she told the jurors according to the courtroom transcripts.
All right. Now, let's talk about up to the point just before February 2003. Do you recall the last time that this family or any members of this family visited the ranch?
I believe it was the summer of 2002.
And how were the boys behaving during that time in the summer of 2002?
They were quite active during that time period.
And when you say quite active, what did they do?
I would say they were enjoying all the privileges of the ranch. I wouldn't say they were nonstop, but they were pretty active.
Okay. And did they have some problems that seemed to need some attention?
Yes.
Can you describe what that was?
Well, we just had a viewing of a golf cart accident, so that would be one example.
What kind of behavior are you talking about?
You know, again, they were active. I guess I'm trying to be polite here. They were very active.
Well, you have to be. It's nice that you're being polite, but we have to ask you to just tell it like it is, whatever it is.
They were pretty reckless at the time. They were driving very fast in the golf carts. They were also driving ranch vehicles. They'd get in a ranch vehicle and take off and drive, and we'd have to stop them. You know, they were young. They could drive a regular vehicle.
Well, let me stop you with that for a moment. When you say ranch vehicles, what kind of vehicles did you have to stop them in?
A regular van, like an Astro van. Mr. Jackson's personal vehicle, a Navigator at the time. Other things like, they were pretty destructive, I would say.
As the testimony continues, so does the off-roading at Neverland.
Okay, so when the kids got the Astro van, an Astro is like a regular minivan, right?
Yes.
When they got in, say, the Astro van and started driving it, to your knowledge, did they ask anybody for permission?
No.
And where would they drive it?
They would drive it on the property.
Okay, do you know if they ever drove out through the gates, the Golden Gates, I guess you call them?
Well, they did drive it around. How far they went, they never drove off the property, but they drove on the property.
Okay, did they drive golf carts through the Golden Gates?
Yes.
So they would be out in that area between the, I still don't have the word for it, but whatever it is, the private...
Occupied area of the property.
During the February to March 2003 period, did the leave the ranch from time to time?
Yes.
Who took them off the ranch?
I would say it was limited to either Vinnie Amon or Chris Carter. Occasionally, Mr. Marcus, Joe Marcus, would take them off the property.
Okay, and what were the purposes of going off the property?
I'm not sure. I didn't inquire. Once they were at the gate and they were ready to leave, we would just open the gate and let them leave.
Were there times they went off the property, for instance, during the day, and they came back 3 or 4 hours later?
Yes.
You know, this testimony seems a lot like testimony we heard before on cross-examination in the prosecution case, doesn't it?
It's like any other Saturday morning cartoon block. I can just see it now. Perfect. All the kids running around and the caricature of Michael. That's just what this reminds me of.
Let's talk about a larger point, if we can, for just a few seconds and contemplate this. Is there an issue of equity, fairness, even-handedness with respect to the finger-pointing by the prosecution being solely at Michael Jackson as opposed to at Michael Jackson and, say, the mothers, for example, at Michael Jackson and these unindicted co-conspirators?
The finger-pointing here is everywhere. It's everywhere. Michael Jackson is the defendant. The mothers are looked at as these people who don't have concern for their children, or they sell their children. The children are out of control. They truly are the lost boys at Neverland.
But
Saturday morning cartoon block.
Is this finger-pointing at the mothers being done by the prosecution? And if so, is it being done enough and effectively? We'll explore that in a little while. In previous testimony, the accuser's family claims that they were not allowed to leave Neverland, but was help just 3 digits away. Here's what Silva told the jury.
All right. Was there anything that would have prevented any guest at the ranch, including Janet, from calling 911 if they had some sort of emergency?
No.
And how do you call 911 from the ranch?
From the guest units, you immediately receive an outside line, so you could pick up the phone and dial 911.
So the guest units, you don't even have to use the code?
No. I haven't done it for a long time, but from what I believe, you can just pick up the phone and you get an outside line.
All right. Let me ask you about the kids, that is, the children being allowed to leave the ranch. Were they allowed to leave the ranch anytime they wanted to?
They were allowed to leave the ranch, but they were supervised.
All right. Was there a concern about them not being supervised?
Well, their mother wasn't there on some occasions, so I would say yes.
All right. And when their mother wasn't there, were they allowed to leave the ranch if they didn't have an adult with them?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask that again. Maybe you meant to say that. But if they didn't have an adult...
If they didn't have an adult, they were not allowed to leave.
If there was not an adult?
They needed to be supervised.
Do you recall if that was communicated to the security staff at any time?
Yes.
And how was it communicated?
It was directed to me verbally, and it was also a written directive.
And who told you that?
I came in on my shift, and I believe one of my supervisors advised me of the directive, and that's how I was notified.
And the contacts that you had with Janet, did she ever indicate to you that she wanted to leave?
No.
And if she indicated she wanted to leave, would she have been allowed to leave?
Yes.
Were you aware as to whether or not transportation was arranged for... You mentioned one time. Other than that one time, was transportation arranged for her to leave the ranch from time to time?
Yes.
As we move on to cross-examination by District Attorney Tom Sneddon, we find out if Neverland's security chief really knows what goes on behind the closed doors of the King of Pop.
At the time that these young boys that you've talked about were in the main residence with Mr. Jackson, they were there without, on many occasions, without parental supervision, correct?
I would say there were some occasions. I don't know if there were many occasions.
I'll settle for some. There were some occasions where some of these young boys were in the house with Mr. Jackson with nobody else present. Is that a fair statement?
I would say that would be fair.
It would also be a fair statement that inside of his room, that nobody would be allowed to go in there and see what was going on. Isn't that a fair statement?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation, no foundation.
Sustained.
So what's the upshot of this? He has locks on his doors and...
Well, Howard, I would think, would be pleased because he complained earlier that the cross-examination was not going to the crux of the case, and this really does, doesn't it, Howard?
Okay, he's entitled to one.
All right.
Oh, just
What
one.
you have in this situation, though, is really exactly what we didn't expect to have, because what it is saying is, I didn't see anything. Yeah. Well, you could have tons of people who are somewhere who didn't see anything. I'm frankly surprised the judge is letting in this kind of evidence.
Oh, Ricky, you're not surprised. This judge lets it all in.
No,
He doesn't let it all in. Come on, he's made some decisions that have kept significant items out. But
you mean he made some correct decisions? You're right.
Howard,
he did.
you are so harsh. Let's talk about this issue. What about the dynamic in this courtroom? Do jurors care whether or not Sneddon's doing the cross-examination versus Auchincloss versus anybody else?
They've shared a lot,
Mesereau?
James. Don't you think they've shared a lot so that you don't really get that feeling on the side of the prosecution? On the side of the defense, I think it's different. I think
Does it mean that this witness is not as important because Sanger's running it?
It may or may not, but I think that ultimately they want to hear from Mesereau. He's the king of the King of Pop's
Do you guys agree? Real quick? Yes? Yes? No?
Oh, not bad.
Howard's looking quizzical again. We'll work on him over the break. Who should stay and who should go? Neverland security logs under question when we come back.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Were other young friends of Michael Jackson's forbidden to leave the ranch, or were the accuser and his young siblings the only ones with that prohibition? Here's what the Neverland security chief, Violet Silva, said according to the courtroom transcripts.
And do you recall any log entries during that period of time in which somebody wrote a note saying, don't let Wade Robson leave this ranch?
No.
And with regard to Brett Barnes, during the same time period that you were working as a security officer and you were reviewing those logs, did you ever see an entry that said anything about not letting Brett Barnes leave the ranch?
No.
Now, if I were to ask you the same question about Jordan, your answer would be the same, correct?
Correct.
In fact, the entry that was made on the logs that you testified to that Mr. Sanger showed you was the first and only time you've ever seen that kind of entry made on a ranch log, correct?
Yes.
So, Sean, how does this fare overall? How is the defense doing thus far?
Well, with regard to this last piece of questioning, I think Sneddon does a good job of raising the suggestion that Gavin was treated differently from everyone else. But on the other hand, Gavin, I think, has distinguished himself by acting up, by misbehaving so much on the ranch, and there's other testimony about him painting graffiti, that he really does perhaps warrant a special prohibition.
How's the defense doing, Howard?
Well, I think how the case is doing is a better question. This is all about where there's smoke, there's fire. I've said it 100 times. I got to say it again. The case is about the testimony, or should be about 4 or 5 people. Everything else is little fires and warm cinders
But given
around the
that
circle.
is indeed the case, is the
Yes.
defense handling it appropriately?
I guess they're doing the best they can.
All right, Ricky?
Well, the defense had 2 choices. They could have rested, which, by the way, bold move.
Yes, it would have been a bold
I might
move.
have done that. I might have done that. I don't know if my client would have let me do it.
Yeah.
But it really would have been, I don't want to dignify this case with a response. Since they decided to go the other way, they have to go for broke. They have to impeach every witness on each of these allegations.
Nodding
That's a
approvingly,
tall
yes.
order.
Yes.
That's right.
Here is, again, the overriding question. Why was Michael Jackson, 35 years old, sleeping with kids 15, 20 years his junior?
Yeah.
That's
where
the
it starts.
overriding
That's where it
question
starts.
in this trial.
But there is indeed the other issue, that first count, the false imprisonment and the like. We are on Macaulay Culkin watch still, folks. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, 7:30 p.m., exclusive coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. 7:30 altogether now, right here on E!